Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this event where we're going to celebrate Coventry University's status as entrepreneurial university. Not alone do we celebrate having won the awards last year, but also want to share our journey, the Coventry University journey on entrepreneurship with fellow colleagues in the UK. And as we speak, there are people who actually logged in from Finland, Oman, South Africa, Nigeria and Germany. And so welcome to everybody from wherever you're listening to us as well. Unfortunately, you can't join us virtually for the lunch, but you at least can join us for the workshop. In terms of the proceedings for today, after the welcoming of Professor Madeline Atkins, I will provide an overview of Coventry University as an entrepreneurial university, followed by two students who will share their experiences within Coventry University as entrepreneurial students. And that will be followed by a panel discussion. And our international listeners are more than welcome to email me questions, because my members of the panel, Mr. John Latham, Deputy Vice-Chancellor at Coventry University, Mr. Peter Harman, CEO of UKBI, and Professor Paul Hannon, CEO of the National Centre for Entrepreneurship in Education, love answering difficult questions. So if you really want to send me your questions, I'm on email, so you can just send it through to me as well. Now, to start off today's proceedings, I'm calling on the Vice-Chancellor of Coventry University, Professor Madeline Atkins, to formally welcome you at this celebratory event. Professor Atkins.
Thank you, Gideon. Something about being under 5'2" and microphones in this. Well, so welcome to everybody who is here, and a particular welcome to our colleagues from around the world who are joining us through various media. Delighted that you could be with us this afternoon, or whatever time it is with you. I've been asked to say a few words about how this university became entrepreneurial, and particularly over the last few years, the kind of journey that we have undertaken to get there. So we began, of course, as so many MBA types do, with a mission statement. I always joke that you can line up presidents of universities and write out all their mission statements along the bar, and probably any one mission statement would fit any other university. But nonetheless, despite my skepticism, we do have a mission statement, and that is it. And you will see that in that statement we do put an emphasis on some of the characteristics that are associated with being entrepreneurial and enterprising. Of course, itself appears as a word there, but the dynamic and global perspective, both very important. Also for us, the kind of university we are, founded in the mid-19th century by manufacturers and financiers at the height of the Industrial Revolution in this country, we have from the first worked in partnership, and that remains a very important part of our DNA, and it is through that partnership with external organizations that we translate much of the enterprise and the entrepreneurial activity that we undertake. So how does all this work in terms of academic strategy? You'll see there just a few bullet points. First of all, of course, our courses are very vocational in nature. We have a great deal of employer engagement in those courses, both in the design of the curriculum, but also in its delivery, an emphasis on work experience, an emphasis on trying out new things, and of course we try to be responsive to new sectors as they arrive and arise within our economy, and that of course of Europe more generally. So over the last few years you would see in this university, as indeed in many, an emphasis, for example, on digital media, on the fashion industry, a new enormous global industry, and on other contemporary important parts of our economy. And alongside that, the research that we do is not the Nobel Prize winning kind of research, the blue skies research. That's not us at all. We are all about applied research. That's research with external organizations focusing on their short and medium term issues and opportunities. For example, working with them on their market plans, on their export plans, on product design and innovation and so on, as we have done since 1843. Alongside that, we wrap a knowledge transfer and exchange, very much part of our applied research, and we have taken on some of the new forms of knowledge production, including co-production with our partners across a range of our disciplines, perhaps most particularly at the moment in the open media programs that we run. Who are our students? Well, we're a medium-sized university. We have 22,000 students here in Coventry, 1,000 students in London. We have something like 5,000 students taking our programs overseas, and about 3,000 who are employees on employer premises, again, taking our courses or courses that lead to accreditation and validation from us. So we are considerably more than just a traditional full-time undergraduate institution, and we always are looking for the new markets and the new forms of engagement with employers that we can reach out to. And in a moment, when I talk about our global reach, for example, two of those employers, one is Emirates Aviation College, where we are running programs with and for them, not just in Dubai, but now also in London and in Singapore. Another would be Infosys in India, where we have developed and deliver some of their in-service training. So, as I say, not just a conventional undergraduate operation, but a much wider run of engagement than that. And we use a group structure in the university to enable us to set up these subsidiary companies that undertake much of this work. And when we're selecting students, including our traditional undergraduate students, 18 to 21-year-olds straight out of school, I always say to parents, look, if your son or daughter has been running a company from the back bedroom through eBay or through some other social media, or they have been working in volunteering and working in a social enterprise in the community, and if you're worried that that activity means they haven't quite got the top academic grades you had hoped for, we are actually the place that will really value your son or daughter. We'll give them both the best of an academic degree, but we will also nurture that enterprise and entrepreneurial spirit. So we are indeed on the lookout for students who have that get up and go, that approach to life which is proactive and where they are interested in doing things outside of the confines of the campus and beyond the formal course. Our curriculum, we have the following kind of characteristics around the curriculum. You'll hear a little bit more this morning about our Institute for Entrepreneurship, but alongside that and run from that, we have particular degrees which you can take in enterprise and entrepreneurship, and those are linked to substantive subject degree programs. And so this is not just a business school outfit, but we have students from a wide range of disciplines who also take the degree in entrepreneurship alongside. Then any student, any undergraduate student, can use their options choice within their degrees to pick up a module in enterprise or entrepreneurship under what we call the Advantage program. This is designed to appeal to employers looking at the CV or resume of that graduate when they reach that stage in their career. And we find many, many students, even if they aren't going to set up their own company or go into a social enterprise, nevertheless really enjoy the opportunity of undertaking a more enterprising module or a module which is focused around business startup. The students run their own business society by student entrepreneurs for student entrepreneurs, and we have a broad pathway of support in the university for students who do want to set up and trade their own company, from pre-incubator, incubator, mentoring, and last but not least, our Student Enterprise Fund, which is run by our Chancellor, Sir John Egan, and has funding from several of our alumni and friends of the university, substantial investment funding, to be invested in the best student business ideas and the best staff ideas. The investment is in the form of a loan, which has to be repaid, and I'm pleased to say that all the student businesses that we have set up under this enterprise fund are repaying their loan at the interest rate that the investors, the dragon's den of investors, decided. We had one very enterprising young man last year who pitched for funding to the Chancellor, achieved it for his company, and having got the piece of paper in his hand, went off to our local bank and negotiated a loan at a better interest rate than the university had been prepared to invest in. And I think in the future, one of the things that we will do is to actually set up a deal with at least one, maybe two banks, where they take on the least risky of the business ideas from our students and staff, we having done the due diligence, and then leaving the enterprise fund to invest in the more risky, but of course with the greater potential of return. So that's on the horizon for us, and something we're looking to develop in the near future. Of course, it's not just students and the curriculum, it's also our staff, and we do look to appoint into the university people from the business world, not just academics. We have a parallel set of criteria for appointment, depending on whether you're from an academic background or from a business background. And throughout our appraisal and promotion processes, we put emphasis on capabilities around business development, innovation, team working, and so on. And that's as true for our staff, who keep our buildings clean and well looked after, through to the most eminent of our professors. It's true of the directors of services, it's true of everybody who works within the university. For those who particularly are interested in the entrepreneurial agenda, we do provide particular training for them, and we put them onto programs that are run nationally for leadership in an entrepreneurial university, for example. There's an excellent national program that is run for that purpose, and again, I think you may be hearing more about that later this morning. And as I've said before, those staff can also go through a pathway of support and achieve investment funding from the Chancellor's Dragon's Den Fund. So we parallel for the students exactly the same support structure for our staff. Just a matter of interest, at any one time in the university, we would have 80 or 90 students actively trading their companies. I said a little while ago that I don't think you can be an entrepreneurial university these days without having global reach, and without the students, and indeed the staff, having a global outlook. And this is one of the guarantees that we now make to our undergraduates, that each and every one will, at some point in their time with us, have the opportunity of an international experience. It may be through a conventional study abroad, it may be through work experience abroad, it may be through volunteering, and we have a unit which is now dedicated to increasing that mobility and making sure that our students are well supported when they go overseas, and that when they come back, they understand and we celebrate the growth in capabilities, the growth in confidence that that has given them. Obviously, much of our research now is with international partners, which again comes down into the curriculum. We require every course to have an international dimension to the learning experience, and we expect now our staff also to have that global outlook. Indeed, we appoint many staff from overseas into our staffing complement. We have, many partners. We have 50 partners, for example, currently in China, and we now have a substantial presence of offices overseas, Singapore, in Africa, in China, in India, and I think that that will increase yet further. So what are the measures by which we know whether or not we are successful. Here is just one set. You may have your own KPIs, key performance indicators, that you use. These are things that we rate here at Coventry. And as you see there, we work particularly with small and medium-sized businesses. For our government, that's important. It's where growth comes in the economy, and certainly where increased employment comes in the economy, but we don't neglect the larger companies and the research agendas that go with them. As you can see, virtually all our staff are applied research active, and that's not just academic staff. We also require our senior directors of professional services to be active in applied research as well, so that their parts of the university are also thinking enterprise, thinking entrepreneurship. And we were pleased that we won the Entrepreneurial University of the Year title last November, so we can still use that until the next round of those awards are made in November of this year. So what have we learned? I think for me, I would say it has to be a planned and coordinated approach. It's no good having the odd bit of the curriculum without the staff sign up. There's no point in putting a student pathway in without the investment to make their businesses a reality. We need to have your governors on board, which we do. You need to have that kind of totality of thinking, a systemic approach across the university. For me, almost all the good ideas come bottom up, from staff at the front actually leading this with students, with their colleagues, from all over the university, and indeed from good practice that they see and share elsewhere. But then that needs the support and encouragement of the senior management in order to turn that into something that is effective and is not just a series of ad hoc little projects. And to bring it together, give it momentum, leverage from what they want to do, that often needs a framework and investment and the quite explicit support of the senior management at every level. So I think those would be the two things that I would say we've learned from our experience over the last few years. Thank you again for your attention, and I wish you every success with today's conference. Gideon, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Atkins, for the words of welcome and for the leadership in terms of this entrepreneurial university. She's quite busy and know she needs to go off later, so thank you for your time today.
Another international delegation.
Sorry, just switching quickly. And just a couple of words latching on to what Professor Atkins said in terms of the entrepreneurial university. How do we know that we are entrepreneurial, and what are we doing currently, and what do we do in future? Because it is no good just do stuff at this stage, but we need to keep it going for the future as well. And if I start off, and it is always nice to refer to somebody else, because nobody can say I'm wrong by saying that. So Peter Drucker said that we need something that is normal, steady and continual. And I think in terms of the society as we see that in a global environment, we doubt that entrepreneurship is that normal and that steady and that continual in all areas. And to really promote that, you need institutions, you need champions to promote entrepreneurship. One of that being the Entrepreneurial University, and later on you can challenge Professor Paul Hannon on this definition, but it is a good definition of what this Entrepreneurial University is. And if you read through that, you can also see that it is actually getting people engaged, actively encouraging and embracing students. And that word actively, I think, is what makes a difference in terms of entrepreneurial universities, because it's not just about teaching entrepreneurship, it is more to do with practice that, apply that in real life, test it out, and let it be a culture of being entrepreneurial in future. Having said that, we've won this entrepreneurial award November last year, and I thought that we just need to reflect on the criteria against which we were measured. And there are 4 criteria that were put across to us. The first one, institutional environment, leadership issues. Professor Atkins referred to that as well. The culture being formed in an institution. Secondly, the students. What are they doing? Are they really enrolling for these programs? Do we see them taking up loans from a student enterprise fund, or is it just there? Thirdly, you need staff members to really steer this process. And if they are not entrepreneurial, you're not going to get entrepreneurship. So they need to show innovation and entrepreneurial flair. And lastly, how do you know that you're progressing actually? And that's the impact side. And we're currently busy with this research excellence framework where people are focusing more on the impact side. You can do all the research, but somewhere you need to show that it is actually working. And just reflecting quickly on these areas, institutional environment, I'm not going to go through everything. Professor Atkins already mentioned some of them as well. Deputy Vice Chancellor, that was John, that was just running out to answer a new opportunity, but he will be back. And the specialized institutes, basically, within Coventry University, it's not just the Institute of Applied Entrepreneurship, it's the Serious Games Institute, Health Design Technology Institute, Creative Arts as well. So there are various specialized institutes as well. The Chancellor's Student Enterprise Fund was created because banks are not really supporting new startups. So we need to build up a profile, a financial profile of new students. And then naturally within the whole group, or the Coventry University group, we also got a trading arm that's looking after the more business orientated activities as well. So on that, it is a whole culture being formed. And if you refer to the mission again, entrepreneurship is part of the strategy, is part of the mission statement of Coventry University. Student engagement, we've seen a tremendous growth in student engagement the past 2 years. Actually, we've about doubled the numbers of students involved in modules in entrepreneurship, in full awards in entrepreneurship. That's more on academic side. We see more students getting involved in the pre-business incubation phases. We've got a SPEED system, and the SPEED system is just for student placement in entrepreneurship. It is not something else. It's not a drug that we use to get people entrepreneurial, but it is pre-incubation phase to support students that has never been involved in entrepreneurship. So Coventry University supports from the lowest possible level of entrepreneurship. Mentoring system, and then one of my colleagues sitting at the back somewhere, Tom Williamson, so that's one, so you can ask him about Operation Husky. It's like a boot camp, 24 hours, locked into a room. You're not allowed to sleep. You can work as fast and hard as possible, and you will receive a pizza here and there, and some input on technical matters as well. And this type of Operation Husky is winning field as well, because entrepreneurs are time conscious as well, and everybody's complaining that they can't really look after their business because they haven't got time. So now you've got 24 hours, nothing else, no television, you work on your business, and Tom is quite successful in that one. In terms of staff members, there are various training programs nowadays available for staff members. As the NCE is presenting the IEEP program, and they are normally a staff member from Coventry University on that. And we've now reached a point where there's a champion promoting entrepreneurship within each faculty, and that is really supporting entrepreneurship as we go along. regular think tanks. We need to focus, we need to discuss entrepreneurship issues, more about the future. Now we will get back to the future as well. And then you've seen some of the numbers involved in what we're doing at Coventry University. There are local, regional, national, international projects that we're involved with, various partners as well, such as the business incubation systems in Oman, Nigeria, and various other open innovation practices and projects as well. So you need to measure that as well, and we know that impact measurement is a new field, but we need to do more probably in future to measure the real impact. So if we do everything correctly, we probably need to arrive at this type of system where your mindset, the entrepreneurial mindset, is more about the future, current and the future, because current you still need to pay your bills, and the future because you need to be sustainable over time. And not the other way around, where 50% is about what went wrong in the past, and then 45% is maybe we should not do that again. So it's a more futuristic mindset, which entails taking risk. So, but we try to address this risk by integrating and coordinating some of our entrepreneurial activities through a conceptual model. And I know a conceptual model is normally quite clear for the person who developed that, and for everybody else is saying it's got too much time. But I will try to explain this. And what it is that we need to stimulate growth in the economies in which we operate. We cannot just merely create one person shows and they're staying on that same level and they're not growing. So what we're saying is that the level of entrepreneurship on a vertical axis needs to grow over time, as well as the growth of the company as well. And we're not saying high growth. We're saying growth orientated. In other words, you need to be innovative to really go to a next level as well. And then we refer to lifestyles. That blue line basically in the middle is a lifestyle, because some sectors are not really clearly defined anymore. It is difficult to say whether you're in the agriculture sector or in tourism. So that is a lifestyle of entrepreneurship, to make sure that you can actually hop from one industry to another industry depending on the nature of technology and nature of the opportunities. On the top side of this conceptual model, you will see various activities. The blue one is on the knowledge. We need to have the right knowledge. I think it is Peter Drucker who also said that entrepreneurship is a risky business because most of the entrepreneurs are not trained in that. So that is why it's a risky business. So we need to understand the principles behind what we're doing, and then we need to start doing stuff, the pre-incubation, and then going into incubation areas as well. And lastly, this one is where companies are in existence, they're operating, and we need to help them to grow over time as well. And everything that you see on this conceptual model is part of the Coventry University fabric culture as well, because the green areas below that is all the support that's provided to these different blocks as well. And just to confuse you a bit more, I've unpacked that to try to make it simpler, and saying, well, basically what that is to take the 5 main areas and you just unpack that, and we to say what's the rationale for each of these areas, what are the objectives so that you can measure the progress, the strategies behind everything, as well as the infrastructure needed and the income. How are you going to pay for that? Because somewhere you need to pay for that. And as we know, worldwide, subsidies are becoming a problem. So this is just one way that we're trying to integrate things a bit better in Coventry University. So what about the future? Is it just Coventry University? No, there are various universities involved in becoming entrepreneurial, and we currently involved various partners in a European university enterprise network, where we try to build better relationships between academia, students and businesses, so that we can improve the employability of students over time, improve the levels of innovation, because the levels of innovation is under pressure and we need to improve on that as well. The various partners, as you can see that, and Professor Paul Hannon from National Centre for Entrepreneurship in Education is part of a critical part of that. That's all the universities, and we need to expand that to 30 universities in 10 Europe countries, and we've got various business partners involved. It is becoming quite important for the business partners within the entrepreneurial model. The previous Friday we had a fantastic meeting with Hewlett-Packard, and being invited to their laboratory to see how they're doing things is a massive step forwards in terms of entrepreneurship, taking people to real-time, real-life situations. This is just some of the objectives of the EUN, and why I'm just highlighting that is we're currently starting to discuss this with more universities outside this network to share information, share experiences as well. Because if I just go back to this list of partners, the 7 universities on the top of this list, they're all on different levels of readiness in terms of entrepreneurship. And that is actually when you start to learn how to implement entrepreneurship, when you've got different levels of readiness and different levels of implementation as well. So we're inviting more universities now to be part of this knowledge framework. As you can see, it's a wide system, including curriculum processes and engaging in some specific projects to see whether it works or not. It's a Europe Commission funded project, and for us as Coventry University it's important to not just share our knowledge within these partnerships, but also to learn what the other universities are doing in this as well, because for us it is a journey. Entrepreneurship is probably never going to be an end result. It's always going to be a journey, and you need to adapt as you go along. Some lessons at this stage from being entrepreneurial and entrepreneurial universities from the different countries, being that there's not one system fits all. There's not one blueprint saying A, B and C and you're entrepreneurial university. There are different cases, there are different ways of promoting entrepreneurship. And the second one is probably more important, is that you need a continuous conversation on how entrepreneurship being implemented in a specific university. Coventry University being involved for a number of years in entrepreneurship, and still we need to have this kind of transparent conversation on how to improve. Do you like the word entrepreneurship in your faculty, yes or no? If you hate it, let's use another word, but let's still focus on the levels of innovation and creativity, etc. We also have learned from ourselves in Coventry University, as well as from the other universities involved in this project, that there are different levels of readiness within a university. Different faculties, departments, institutes are on different levels of readiness, and you don't need to get everybody to the same level. Probably use one or two as a case study, as a visible sign of how you promote entrepreneurship, and use them as a slingshot approach to promote entrepreneurship. And lastly is what the end result should be agreed as well. And the end result in some cases is to accept that it's going to be a journey, accept that there are curriculum issues, there are academia issues, and there are business related issues that need to be combined over time. And from these lessons learned, we as Coventry University can always improve ourselves, and being part of a network and learn from other networks as well how to deal with this phenomenon that is really needed within a new global environment. And one of the issues that we have seen as well within these lessons learned is that we need to think a little bit more proactively about the future. When things were good and all economies were on the top in a boom phase, you seldom worry about the next year or 2 years from now, because why should you? Because everything is fine. So now it is about rethink the future, learn to think more proactively, and see how we can actually engage with all the stakeholders around us to be entrepreneurial. It sounds complex. We've had that discussion as well in the past. It sounds complex. Some people are saying just to spell entrepreneurship is complex enough. So yes, it is complex. I think the global environment is complex, but then turned off as probably this is why we are in universities, within the university industry, because we need to embrace the complexity and via its treatment of that, reduce that to manageable and appropriate simplicity activities to implement. We need to interpret this turbulent environment, finding ways of simple tools to implement that. So that is our story so far. We will probably in a year's time have another story and another version of being entrepreneurial, and over time innovation is dictating some activities as well. But we've said students are quite important to us, so I'm inviting Ayub Hazam and David Wick to come and sit in the witness box and to tell us about their stories as well, because what we will ask them is first just a 5 minutes introduction of what they're doing, and then from that point onwards we can invite some questions from you, the audience, as well. So I think we just need to switch that microphone on. You technology orientated. There's an on and off button, in other words. All right. So first of all, so let's go to Ayub Hazam and tell us what you're doing and why you're doing that.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the founder of A-Class Apps. This is a mobile application development company specializing in iPhone and iPad apps. So first I'll just tell my story of how I got into the app development, and then I'll speak about how speed has helped me. So it all started when my brother, he had the old generation iPod. I mean, it's not touchscreen, black and white, and he broke it. My brother's not very tech savvy, so he put it back in his box and on top of his bedroom. So I noticed this. So me being me, I went into his room, I took it from his room and I started fixing it. So once I fixed it, I was using it for a few months until he caught me with it. And he was like, give me that back, that's mine. But he was happy because I fixed it for him. So then I was forced to buy a new iPod. And I searched online and I found the iPod Touch. For those who aren't familiar with the iPod Touch, it's basically the same as the iPhone, but it just doesn't use a SIM card. So everything you can have in the iPhone, such as the apps, the pictures and videos and the musics, you can use all of that on it. So I searched online, and because I was a student, it was quite expensive, so I really couldn't afford it. But I was speaking to a friend the next day in a lecture, and luckily the guy next to me overheard me speaking about this, and he said, I work in an electronics shop, I can get you a discount. So we arranged it, and he got me quite a big discount, and I bought it the next day of him. This was around about a year ago. It was the first time I'd ever used a touched Apple device, so I'd never used the iPhone before, I'd never tried the iPad, and I was actually amazed by the interface and everything of it. So I started seeing the apps, and all these apps I was purchasing from the App Store, I was wondering who makes these, there must be someone making these and they're making money off it. So I decided I want an app on the App Store. So then I did a quick Google search, and I realized that the only really thing you need to make an app is a MacBook Pro. And that's where my second problem came in, because the MacBook Pro is £1,000 and I'm a student, I don't have a job. At that point I could have quit, I could have just finished, but I decided no, I really am going to have an app in the App Store. So I needed a way to make money, so I went online and I found a wholesale supplier of clothes, men's polo shirts. So I ordered a bit of a stock of this and I put it in a big bag. 2 weeks later it arrived at my house. I put it in a big bag, and I just went out onto the streets of Coventry. I went to barber shops, and in the atmosphere in the barber shops, it was quite close to my house. They're very friendly, and I started going there a few days, and then I had a reputation. So whenever I would go in there, the barber shop would call his friends, "Hey, the guy who sells clothes is here. Do you want anything?" So then I started selling. I got quite a few clients from that. Same as a restaurant. In the back of a restaurant, I noticed people playing pool and having tea. I just put my stuff in the chair and just made an announcement, does anybody want to buy anything? I sold to friends, and surprisingly, I even sold in the library. While I was doing my assignment, there'd be someone next to me like, "Psst, hey, you want to buy any clothes?" But you'd be surprised, it actually works. They bought it off me. So I did this for a few weeks, and then I finally got enough for a MacBook Pro, so I bought it. And my friends always used to laugh at me because whenever I would take it out of the bag, I would be like a baby because like I would put it down so gently because I worked so hard to get it, but I finally got it. And then my next, the next part of the journey happened. I needed to start making apps. So I searched online, and I went through a few tutorials, and I needed something. I always wanted to make an app that no one had ever made before. So I searched a few tutorials, and I decided to make an easy app, obviously, because it's my first one. So I made an app which features music artists from the UK. It's like a niche genre of music. And whenever you would click on the UK artist, and then you'd press a button, and it would just make the sound of that artist. But it was going pretty well for 2 weeks. I would just promote it through YouTube and stuff. And then 2 weeks later, the sales were going okay. I opened my email, and one of the artist manager, he emailed me, and it's like copyright infringement. You learn from your mistakes. So then I just sent him a sympathetic, like apologetic email, and I said, okay, I'm taking it off the store. Please, I'm a student. Please don't sue me. So I took her off the store then. So then I needed a new idea. So one day, me and my friend were in the library. We were doing an assignment, and my friend was really stressing about his assignment, and he was stressing about Harvard referencing. To those who are not familiar with it, it's basically every university in the UK and around the world uses Harvard referencing so you don't get caught plagiarizing. So when he complained about this, like the light bulb lit up, and I did a quick search at the App Store, and I realized that there's no app for Harvard referencing in the world. So I decided to make that. So after a few weeks, I released my first real app, Easy Harvard Referencing. I'm happy to say it was the first one in the world of its kind. It helps students reference correctly. So from Easy Harvard Referencing, I started searching other reference styles. Like in Australia, they use APA referencing, and Oscola and Vancouver and Chicago, MLA. There's plenty of reference styles around the world. So from Easy Harvard Referencing, I made an easy referencing range. So I've got about 8 apps now, which Easy Harvard Referencing, MLA, and so on, just all the different styles. So then that's basically my main one. Easy Harvard is the most selling one, and APA is doing good as well. So then from the speed, I was actually I always used to use my MacBook, obviously, because it's new to do my assignments. But one day I needed to change my password, and you can only do that from the university computer. So when I went to the university computers, I changed my password and I logged in, and a message came up saying there's deadlines for the Phoenix Den competition is for tomorrow. I said, do you have an innovative idea? Top prize, £500. So I was like, yeah, I have an innovative idea. Why not? Let me try it out. So I emailed them. They emailed me back saying your interview's tomorrow. I did my interview, and then 2 weeks later, I won first prize in that. And then the speed program invited me back for another interview to join the speed program. So I did my interview, and then they said another week later, they said, congratulations, you are accepted. And through the speed, they've helped me a lot, because I think I have a business mind, but I don't really have business knowledge when it comes to stuff such as tax, setting up a business, and of course copyright. But yeah, so through the speed, they've really helped me, especially with the funding as well, and how to set up a proper business. So now I've set up my company, A-Class Apps Limited, and yeah, that's the story so far. Thank you.
We can ask him some questions later. First, David.
Good afternoon, everyone. I recognise many familiar faces in the room. I've gone through the whole journey at the university. I came in as a student in 2006, and now I'm a lecturer in the IAE. I didn't expect to go to university to get a degree and also start a business. That's not really the done thing, especially back in 2006. But there's so many support programs that I was a part of and been supported along the way, but also the network support in the local area, but also in the university. And also the local networking group in front. Every Wednesday morning, first, second year, third year student, I used to go to the networking meeting, 7 AM. Only a couple of times I wasn't a little bit worse for wear, but most of the times I was there and switched on. Wasn't either. So looking ahead, looking at some of the programs I've been part of, a Vantage scheme, that was I think in the first year when I joined. Great, I didn't, like I say, no business knowledge beforehand, but I'd already been running my own business. Again, it was a hobby which got out of control, I always say. But the actual program which we were part of, to actually get it into a formal state, taking it from the back bedroom or taking it from the university halls into a business which could have been sustainable. That was part of all the Advantage modules we were part of. And I'm so fortunate over the last 2 years, I've been on the other side of that, trying actually to inspire the future generation of entrepreneurs at Coventry through those sort of programs. Those sort of programs are actually really beneficial. Over 1,000 students we've engaged with in the last year through these modules. I think another one we've mentioned is Speed. Speed was a fantastic funding stream for the business. They're also promoting. One of the examples I'm going to give now is when we were the first team in the UK to win using biofuels in the UK. That weekend we were the first team at Brands Hatch to against petrol vehicles. 6 o'clock we won the race. I dropped Ali a quick email, 6:30, and she had a press release done, ready to go by about midnight that night. 6 o'clock I had a phone call, 6 AM the following morning I had a phone call from Ali. Said, unfortunately I didn't pick it up in time, I was asleep. But he said, oh yeah, your piece will be on BBC News at 7:30 that morning. So from the support from the university, through the marketing, through having that idea, literally in 2007 to becoming the first team winning on alternative fuels in 2009 and 10, the publicity that generated for ourselves but also for the university was huge. And that I mean about the network building up around the department. So looking ahead really, the university's grown, the IE's grown from back in 2006 to having 4 or 5 members, not even called the IE, to now having a team of over 16 people. And our role has to be to inspire the future generation, making sure that the business growth for the UK, but also for international partners. And that's what I really see our role in the university to be.
Right, thank you, David. Any questions from the audience that you want to ask them? Really difficult questions would be appreciated.
I can see everyone actually now downloading the apps.
Checking, searching as well. Maybe if I just follow one question here, Ayub. What was the most important reason really for you to start on this entrepreneurial drive? Were your parents involved? Family members involved?
Not really. My brother was involved because he broke his iPod. That's but it really all started from there. Like I said, a year ago I've never used an iPhone in my life, and now I've got my own company building iPhone apps. So, and I just if you want to do something and you put your mind to it, it shows you can do it.
So the lack of money supports one as well.
Yeah.
And to do that. In your case, David, why were you so entrepreneurial?
I think it was in the right sort of environment, getting around the right sort of people, forming the right sort of teams to start the venture. But it had to be in the right sort of university environment. I think that was key. I think I definitely asked the right question to the right sort of people inside the university, knocking on your dean's door asking for funding. And I think not many deans would say, okay, here is some money to actually go and start, but he transferred it over within 2 days later. And I think the backing from the whole department in many different ways. I think I always say now is the best time to start a business being a student. I think getting that across to the students is really fundamental.
Will you carry on being entrepreneurial in future?
I think as you know, Gideon, I keep asking you for money.
Yeah, that's actually a wrong question to you. And you?
Yeah, I think because of the support and everything the people have done for me, I don't see myself working for anybody anymore. So I don't think I'm gonna, look for a job after. I think I'm just gonna carry on what I'm doing, and maybe if other ideas come up, not just app development, maybe something else.
I think one lesson that we've learned, and through this involvement of students as well, is that we've been implementing a system of employing graduate interns that's gone through the system, and to mentor, as we can call it that way, fellow students as well, because the age gap between David, for example, and the first year is slightly less than between myself and a first year student. So it is always good to reflect on those processes that we need to have in an entrepreneurial university. Is a mentoring system, guiding people, and that not everything is starting overnight. You're actually walking a pathway with that person. It is hand-holding as well.
I also think that there's a huge demand at the university. This is university student demand led. With some of the research Tom Williams and myself done last year, that's 3% of the university students are actually running their own business, with 65.5% of the students actually wanting to start a business at some point in their career. So there's a number of students needing entrepreneurial support. They might not use it for the next 5-10 years, but they already need that knowledge and those skills in the future. I think that's quite key, looking ahead to being the entrepreneurial university.
Any other questions from your side? I think with that we say thank you to Ayub and David, and during lunchtime you can tap more into their experiences as well, so thank you for both. Now I'm calling on my panel, John Latham, Peter Harmon, Paul Hannon, to have this hot seats over there. Seeing that there was just a question that came in, that will be quite an interesting question to be asked. But may I first introduce you from my left-hand side, your other side, right-hand side. John Latham on this side is Deputy Vice Chancellor for Business Development at Coventry, and is primarily responsible for all business development activities related to employer-based organisations. In the middle is Peter Harmon as Chief Executive of UK Business Incubation, and Peter has worked in innovation and entrepreneurship through best practices, business incubations through the UK, Europe, Central Asia, Oman, India, the US, Saudi Arabia, and so on. Last person on the other side, Professor Paul Hannon. Paul is Chief Executive at the UK's National Centre for Entrepreneurship in Education, that is supporting long-term cultural change in the UK universities and colleges. So really a literate experience panel here. So let me just start off to get a conversations, and then the rule of the game is I need one question from the left block and I need one question from the right block. So whoever is going to ask that, that's fine. But John, to you, the first one is the importance of good relationships between academia and businesses. How can we really create that?
Okay, I think the main issues that most universities face, or historically universities have faced, is how applied or appropriate is the education that they provide, and how do they support the needs of business as we engage with them. As a university, we've taken quite an entrepreneurial approach. As Madeline said in her opening lines, we are an applied research university, so most of the activity that we do as a university, whether it be through education, in preparing students for work, or through our research, which is a maximum of 5 years from the market, so quite close to the market, we've always put in place strategies which is about identifying the needs of the marketplace, whatever the marketplace happens to be. You only know about what the marketplace wants if you're in touch with the market, which is very important, and if you're in touch with industry who is supplying the market. So we have, as a university, quite a large team in place whose job is around business development. That's engaging in and supporting other people's business development as much as our own. And primarily we have to do that through very good networking, very good interactions with the outside world, and being very entrepreneurial in our approach. So for example, we are now talking to a number of our corporate partners, of which we have a number of strategic corporate partners, And a number of those are quite interested in incubation and entrepreneurship within their organisations. So we're seeing a resurgence, if you like, within the corporate market for large organisations to support their staff in engaging and starting new businesses. Now, for once, if you like, a lot of universities are actually ahead of the game here because we've been doing it, as you've heard here, and a number of them are approaching us and organisations like ourselves, UKBI and Paul's NCE, to actually look at the ways in which we can support industry viewing a university in many ways as a corporate structure. We are a corporate body. We just happen to provide education as our primary role and research as a secondary role, but fundamentally we are now a large corporate body. As a university, you can pull off our set of accounts. We have a turnover which is over 200 million. We have 2,500 employees. We're engaged in a number of industry sectors. We operate in global markets. It's only when you come to the fact that our name is a university do you identify that we're actually a university if you use those metrics. We are a large organisation whose role is to support other organisations, and most businesses interact with other businesses, and most of their success is through interacting with other businesses. So I think one of the real primary goals we have as a university is to interact with business, to find out what their needs are, where the gaps are, then to support individuals through starting up businesses or working with businesses to grow their activity, to enable us to increase the amount of enterprise and entrepreneurship activity we have. That makes our students more employable, of more interest, that makes our research more applicable, and companies wanting to work with us more. So I think that whole approach of being both professional in our linkage with business, but then taking advantage of the feedback and putting in place support structures within the university to enable that to happen, actually increases the amount of enterprise and entrepreneurial activity that we can engage with, and allows us to support the levels of infrastructure and numbers of students that we have already engaged within our organisation.
Right, thank you. I'm going to hop over to Paul. I'm going to run through all three first, and then I will allow you time to ask questions. Paul, we're talking about this entrepreneurial university. Should every university become an entrepreneurial university, or is that a choice, a strategic choice?
Well, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Well, clearly, yes, it's a strategic choice, but I don't think it's a difficult choice to make. We've heard a lot already today about the pressures on universities from globalization, competition, being in a fast-changing marketplace. Even at home, we're having to deal with policy changes, fundamental changes to the way universities are funded through the switch to student fees. So there's a lot of complexity. You used the word yourself in your presentation, which creates a lot of unpredictability and uncertainty about the future. And it's in those environments where stable approaches and models don't work. You need to be flexible, adaptable, you need to be able to identify opportunities quickly, you need to be able to grasp them, seize them, and actually make something happen from them. Now, in my book, I call that being entrepreneurial. So my answer to your question would be yes, every university needs to be entrepreneurial if it's going to survive in the world that we're in at the moment. But just to put a little bit of flesh quickly on that, that means two things to me. I think one, John has already alluded to, which is the fact an entrepreneurial university means actually running the organisation in an entrepreneurial way. So it's a university as an entrepreneurial organisation. But I think the second element to this is actually a university that creates an environment in which entrepreneurial thinking and behaviour and skills are encouraged, developed and supported and rewarded. And I think for me that's what makes a university truly entrepreneurial. And that creates challenges not just for the students, as we heard, but it creates challenges for the staff, and it also creates challenges for the senior management and the leadership. And my own organisation focuses on how we can affect those three areas, the students, the staff and the leaders, to encourage more of our universities in this country to be more entrepreneurial, that create graduates that are entrepreneurial and innovative. And if we can do that, we'll actually end up with more graduate entrepreneurs. So I see graduate entrepreneurs as a byproduct of creating entrepreneurial graduates. And boy, do we need more graduate entrepreneurs at the moment to stimulate the economy, for social change. So I think you've used Peter Drucker quite a lot today, so I'll just add another one.
Okay.
2 words that make up a sentence that Peter Drucker used in his book on innovation and entrepreneurship, which just said, entrepreneurs innovate. So if we want more innovation, which drives growth, then we need more entrepreneurial people. And I think education has a critical role in creating the environments in which those entrepreneurial people are developed.
Thanks, Paul. And then
Can I just ask that the speaker use the microphone so that people watching online can hear you?
okay,
Yes,
sorry.
my apologies.
It's on and off, Peter.
Technical.
Okay. All right, Peter. Just the last question, and then it is open to everybody. The role of business incubation is a hotly debated issue, Peter. Is there a role for business incubation in this entrepreneurial university? How do you see that evolve over time?
I think it's obvious from everything we've heard this morning that business incubation generally should be at the core of entrepreneurial activity within universities. If we look at the UK and most of the world, most universities are directly or indirectly involved in business incubation, and by that I mean they're involved in innovation, entrepreneurship, startup and accelerated growth. All of them sometimes, but sometimes only 1 or 2 of those. But they are all involved. In fact, recognition of that, and I'm going to do a plug if you'll excuse me on this, but a recognition of that is that for the first time this year we're running our conference at a university in the UK, at Lincoln University, at the end of November, in recognition of that fact. And largely it's driven the agenda of the conference around the concept of unlocking potential, which is what we're all about. Every single speaker has touched on this to some extent. I think the other issue I'd just like to pick up on is that nobody so far today has talked about an incubator, and for me that's a really good thing. Lots of people have talked about environments. What we're about from UKBI's point of view is creating incubation environments that are appropriate for the needs, obviously, of burgeoning entrepreneurs and innovators and so forth. And I think one of the issues we need to recognise in the industry as a whole is that students are occupying places now due to technology they probably weren't occupying 5 or 10 years ago due to technologies and iPads and iPhones and Starbucks and all the other things we can think about. And we need to understand that we need, if we're going to actually do what Paul was just describing, particularly in the state of the economy, we need to go to the places that they are a little bit more than we have in the past. Perhaps not insisting that people wear suits and come into nice buildings like this, although ultimately that will happen, I guess. And I think finally the other point is again, we tend to put incubation into a box. And if we listen to everything from Madeline right through the contributors we've heard this morning and the entrepreneurs, what is patently obvious to me is that a university doing the things that it's doing is the business incubation environment. We've heard from everybody about a whole range of services here and in many other universities around the country. It is a business incubation environment by nature, and it needs to be if it isn't already. So I think let's turn it around the other way rather than saying, well, where is the incubation environment in university? It's everybody, many of you in this room, I guess, certainly as far as Paul is concerned, and John and Gideon and the work they do, is they're trying to create this holistic, this big business incubation environment, as I might describe it, which I think is the healthy way forward, so that we less go down the path of having people in little silos and little boxes, and we turn it round on its side. There's a horizontal activity which is there to take these entrepreneurs, identify the potential and push them through the system. It's all out there. Our problem is we don't seem to be very good at bringing it all together, and at the end of the day that's the core of what business incubation environments are about, or what they should be about, I should say. Thank you, Gideon.
Thanks, Peter. Any questions before I provide that difficult one to them? So let's start with the left block.
Sarah Wilson-Medhurst from Coventry University. You talked earlier, Gideon, about pedagogies and researching pedagogies for entrepreneurship. I just wonder what views the panel had about that. I mean, we've got initiatives here at Coventry, and that's about the whole university, you know, as an incubation unit. I just wonder what views and thoughts you had on that.
Paul, should we start off?
Okay, I think I need to use this because our visitors overseas can't hear me otherwise. It's a very good question. A very good question. My point of view is that the challenge to universities is that we often treat entrepreneurship as a subject, and therefore it has to have a module, and therefore it has to be plonked into a degree program, and it has to be assessed in the way that we assess things, which for me is not about developing the entrepreneurial ways of thinking, the entrepreneurial behaviours that we're trying to encourage in our graduates. So for me, it's more about not what we teach, but how we teach. And that's where your question is so relevant. It's about the pedagogies. On our Entrepreneurship Educators Programme, we have a compendium of just under 50 different pedagogies that you can use to develop entrepreneurial thinking and behaviours. And what we try to do with the educators on that programme is expose them to those different pedagogies and help them to understand how to use them and where to use them. And for a lot of them, it's not that they can't use them, it's that some of them have never experienced them before. Some of them are a little nervous about moving away from their traditional approaches of lectures and case studies and, you know, the traditional methods. But when they start to use them and they've had a chance to practice them and try them out, they actually recognise that it's a much better way to engage the students, and it leads to much better outcomes if the outcomes we're trying to deliver are entrepreneurial thinking and behaviours. So my challenge to all universities is when you're reviewing your degree programmes, when you're validating new degree programmes, look at the learning outcomes for the programme and make sure that there are learning outcomes relating to entrepreneurial thinking and behaviour, because then whoever's running that programme has to assess the students whether they've changed the way they think and changed the way they behave. So if we embedded all of this in learning outcomes, we might one day not have a need for entrepreneurial centres and all the other structures that we put in place, because it will actually be, as Peter was saying, just embedded in everything that we do.
Right, Peter?
I was just going to say, I think this issue of the entrepreneur versus the entrepreneurial behaviours is very interesting. I mean, we have, please don't misunderstand what I'm going to say, but we have, I think, a little bit of an obsession with startups at the moment, which is clearly good, and they exist in large numbers at the bottom of the pyramid that we're trying to create. But so often, and even in incubators, businesses that don't succeed are often seen as being failures in that sense. But if we've actually injected this entrepreneurial spirit into people, they will go out into the public sector, into the legal profession perhaps even, and be more entrepreneurial. And that's good for society as a whole. So I think we need to be very careful again about not putting people into boxes as far as all of this is concerned. And as Paul said, if we could ever get to a stage where we have embedded all of this, which of course at the end of the day will mean a culture change. That's our big challenge in the UK is that we still believe, we wouldn't actually be able to defend it publicly, I'm sure, anybody in this room, but we still actually believe in here that we're at the top of the pile. And we're not, I hasten to add, in case anybody in the room thinks that we are. We're fighting a rearguard action, and I think it's very important that we understand that this culture change is going to be necessary, that you will find with youngsters, for example, in the US, who go out every Saturday morning and go to the bottom of their drive and have car boot sales and everything. This is not something that happens occasionally, it happens on a regular basis. And that isn't going to happen overnight, but let's try and dream for this this sort of stage that Paul was talking about, where actually many of the systems, if we can get this right, won't actually be necessary. We're trying to address a market failure here, a national market failure, if you like. And I think we need to meet that head on in and through many of the organisations that we know about and are represented here.
Okay, and probably the final comment on this from me is around the fact that there is a huge number of forms of pedagogy that is undertaken in universities. There are some areas and certainly some disciplines within this university that are very creative, and there are others that are not very innovative. And I think you've got a scale, and I think actually creativity is the sharp end of innovation in my viewpoint. But there is an opportunity amongst even the most traditional subject areas to be innovative in terms of the approach, and that might be either to, as a lot of academic institutions do, question, debate the tradition, because if you question, debate traditional methods, then in some ways you can create innovation, you can support innovation, you can look for incremental change. But primarily what you're about is giving people the skills, the knowledge, the whereabouts, but really the confidence where they will change the way in which they might do things when they leave the institution or as part of their studies during the institution. That's what it's about, to become more entrepreneurial, to about driving change in the marketplace. So there are some very fundamental, very traditional disciplines within universities who have taught more or less in the same way for a very long time. But that doesn't mean that the content of those courses, in terms of both the, if you like, the exams that are set or the courseworks that are set, cannot be actually prepared in a much more innovative and interesting way, to actually instill more interaction between the individuals involved, to actually challenge some of those traditional methods of delivery. So, you know, changing the pedagogy doesn't actually necessarily mean you need to change the way you even teach the subject. It's around the content and then what's done with the content, and how that's then fed back into a mechanism that moves the individuals forward. Because as Paul rightly said, you know, entrepreneurs tend to be innovative, but fundamentally entrepreneurs are people. So it's about giving the individuals the skills to support them in terms of what they're doing, and to put them into an environment where they feel able to be entrepreneurial and not to be blocked through the way in which the pedagogy is delivered, to being, this is the way it's done and it's the only way it'll ever be done, and you will only pass the tests. I'm now of an age where, you know, I had to go through an education process where I had to learn things and repeat them in a certain fashion. Hopefully that has more or less gone out of the education system now, and we're now into a process where there is more freedom of thought. Even in the younger parts of school education, people are being more challenging, more interesting, and the whole delivery process becomes more innovative, and in some cases more creative in terms of what it's trying to deliver.
Can I just come back briefly? Can you? Yes, it's on there. I think I agree with all those points, and I think, as you know, we've got an initiative here in engineering computing about activity-led learning. It's very much about those things that we've talked about. Just coming back on the point on learning outcomes, I think they're in there, but they're not necessarily valued or surfaced as they might be, and I think that all your points sort of relate to that, really. Thank you.
I just want to latch on to a question coming through, and unfortunately John touched on that, so I need to fire that to John as well. It is on, and then we can go that direction again. It's about the leaders that we need, or champions that we need in the university. And the question being raised is, if we need to identify the 2 or 3 most important issues, what kind of skills do we need to empower them with to be champions in their own universities?
Okay, I think if you want leadership within any university in any particular area, the individuals themselves have to portray naturally those characteristics that you're after, you're trying to gain. So in most universities that appear to be or are entrepreneurial, you tend to find that within the senior team you have got people who will champion through the cause. I think we're quite lucky here in that we have a number of people within the senior team who both believe in entrepreneurship and enterprise and the development of that activity, but also have experience of undergoing that process, either because they've started their own businesses themselves. Madeline Atkins, who we heard of earlier, had quite a successful startup in her own right, so has walked the walk and talked the talk. And a number of others amongst us have also been engaged in starting businesses and undertaking the types of activities that we're asking others to engage in. I also heard Gideon say earlier on the age gap between him and people starting is quite large. It's important that the management...
It was not so big.
No, it's large. Okay, it's large. Okay. And I have the same gap, so don't worry about it. But I think the process also is to recognise, and this is part of the leadership development, that you actually don't know the answers yourselves. And if you think you know the answers, you're probably out of date, because when you were doing it, was a long time ago. And the people that you're dealing with have changed quite considerably in that time and effort. So I think it's to have an open environment where individuals at all levels feel equal enough to be able to come along, talk about the subject matter, have a debate around where we're going to go, and come up with a consensus of where we continually evolve. Because what's probably not come out 100% from the discussions earlier on, except for the point that I think David made, was that IAE didn't exist about 4 or 5 years ago. It was a very small team. It wasn't doing the huge range of activities that we see here today. There have been some other activities that have come and gone, of course. What we have today is the list of activities which fits this university's environment today. They won't necessarily be the same activities in 3 or 4 years' time, but what we hope is that we're doing more and more enterprising and entrepreneurial activities as an institution. As long as you're on that road, you have a direction of travel, and you don't have a preconceived model in its entirety about how you will get there, then what you can do is to start to engage the senior management of the institution, the middle management of the institution, the not so middle management of the institution, but primarily the students actually in the whole process. Because this is a holistic approach to delivering enterprise and entrepreneurship within an organisation. It's not just about having the buy-in from the senior team, but that is very, very important. The other thing I would say, which actually supports us here, and it's not just about getting the award at the end of last year. There are umpteen rewards that we get as an institution. We see successful students. We see students getting jobs in business. We get feedback from the activity that's going on. There's umpteen methods of feedback which reinforces that if you're moving in the right direction, then you should continue to do what you need to do. I think the dangers that universities have and leaders in universities have is when do you stop doing something, because universities tend to do things forever and don't always recognise when they need to stop them or change them. And I think that's really where the strength of a good leadership within an organisation is. They recognise that need to continually change. And just one final point from me on that. I think primarily our job as an institution is, particularly around business startup, which Peter was talking about, is to stop people starting businesses which are not going to be successful or are not going to add value. It's easy to start businesses. It's a little bit more difficult to keep them going for a period of time, but the really hard bit is to stop what is not going to add value and keep the direction going, so that you're putting your resources, time and effort into what will actually ultimately deliver a benefit, an enhancement to where we are today.
Peter, want to add to that?
Just to I think emphasise the issue of being prepared to take risks. Paul talked a lot about flexibility. We are by nature not very flexible. We tend to sort of go down the same path continuously without thinking more about changing our nature to be flexible. The third thing I think is around how we deal with failure. And I think, as somebody suggested earlier, in the education system generally, we're much better at that. That does unfortunately not apply to the banks who look at, for example, at entrepreneurs have failed as that's it and you're out. We've got to make a serious shift on that. And I think I'd just like to also stress this business about leadership. People talk a lot about it, but certainly in our industry, there's too much focus on management, in my view. I remember in a previous life, as they always say on these occasions, we did some work for the UK government on leadership, and part of it inevitably was coming to some sort of understanding of what leadership was. Now you could look in thousands of books and find lots of definitions. The one we came up with as far as this work was concerned was that a leader was somebody who created an environment where other people succeed. And certainly in our industry, that's exactly what it should be about, and I would suggest it's also about a university, an entrepreneurial university. It's not about the institution, although there's reflected glory, such as the awards and so forth last year. But at the end of the day, it's about creating, we're back on that word environment again, where other people succeed. It's not about my ego. And so often there's quite a mix with that. Again, probably this is going to be an unpopular thing, it's going to various places around the world, but I'll say it anyway. There's a little bit of an obsession at the moment, in my view, with celebrity entrepreneurship, which has reflected back on those individuals. I was looking at tweets from various people who I won't mention this morning coming down, and it's so much about them now. I think we've lost the plot a bit on that, and we need perhaps to realign it. Media probably haven't helped a lot, but I think it's something we need to do on that front about celebrity entrepreneurship. As a celebrity entrepreneur.
Thanks.
Thank you. I don't know where to start really. I think for me the starting point is being entrepreneurial is a way of life. You know, it's not something you do from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and then you go home and you be something else. Being entrepreneurial is a way of life. So it's a way of how your mind works, because that drives your behaviour. And it's your behaviour that conditions your actions, and it's actions that deliver entrepreneurial outcomes. So if I'm thinking of leadership, then I'm thinking about entrepreneurial leadership, and I'm thinking that that's an individual who takes real ownership of what they want to do in a truly emotional way. You know, it's theirs. They want to really make something happen, and therefore they will take the risks. They will grasp the opportunities, but they'll also recognise, as Peter said, that they can't do this alone, that they have to bring other people to share their vision, to share their view, to share the passion in actually making a difference in the world. And for me, I see that a lot in students. I see it in some great examples in some universities, like we had this morning from the Vice-Chancellor here. But I don't see a lot of it. I would like to see a lot more of it. So for me, entrepreneurial leadership is about taking ownership emotionally, being responsible fully for the consequences of your actions, and not being hung up on whether those actions work out as the way you thought they were going to, but being prepared to take the risks to move forwards and make a difference.
And I think that brings me to that last question, which can be a short answer. The question is basically, you're talking about us, talking about business incubation and the entrepreneurial university, which sounds like concepts for developed country. Can it be transplanted into developing countries? No. Since Paul, you've got
a microphone, yeah, I'll pick that. That's a real interesting question, because for me it symptomizes the way we think. Because I think actually it's the other way round. I see huge amounts of enterprising action and behavior in underdeveloped countries because it's the only way you survive. I've seen it in Hungary and Poland when they were transiting from a communist state into a more developed world status, and I think it's us that maybe are the ones that need the help, and that's why I really believe that being an entrepreneurial university is about being a truly internationalized organization where you understand other cultures and other actions from all parts of the world, because we can learn so much from that, rather than think we have the answer that we're going to translate and send for export overseas. I think there's so much we could learn. So I guess my take is that let's not underestimate what's going on in other countries, and maybe the challenge or the opportunity for us is to help them harness that in perhaps a more effective, more efficient way. But the enterprising behaviour is there.
Peter?
Yeah, I mean, there's business incubation right across the world. There are about 9,000 of it. Frankly, a lot of the innovation that's taking place is coming from the so-called developing economies. And as Paul suggested, I mean, one of the issues in many developing economies is that it's the level of struggle that is going on in many of these environments, which actually brings a whole level of entrepreneurship that most of us just wouldn't recognise. I can still remember visiting an incubator in Sri Lanka about 4 years ago, and the day after I visited, the Tamil Tigers came over the hill and machine gunned the incubator, and there were problems associated with that. So this is a whole different ball game that people are having to operate in, and there's a lot, as Paul says, I think that we can learn from them, not least in terms of their innovative approaches to starting and growing businesses and generating entrepreneurial activity. This is a global issue. Let's not divide it into two halves. It's an issue that can share. Unfortunately, in our industry, there's a huge willingness to share, which is absolutely great, and it is a real piece of added value of the global network as a whole.
Okay, and just to echo those comments, I suppose, I'm always intrigued by who actually thinks we're developed, because I think some people might just say we're lazy because we have technology and things available to us. I mean, it's quite interesting. There was a study done a few years ago around innovation and development of new technologies and approaches to certain areas a few years ago, and actually when we used to have a mining industry and we used to have issues within the mining industry and we used to have disasters, people were far more innovative and creative and entrepreneurial around survival and basic needs than they are when they're in a comfortable environment. In fact, when you go into a difficult situation, you tend to have a large population which are being innovative, creative, entrepreneurial in their activities, and it's all to do with the level of what you mean by being an entrepreneur. And it goes back to Peter's comment about celebrity entrepreneurs. There are a lot of people out there who now see people on the TV who are earning millions and millions of pounds, or even billions of pounds, or dollars or euros or wherever it happens to be. That's fine, that's at one end of the scale, but there's a vast majority of people all across the world who are being entrepreneurs every single day of their life and looking at incremental improvements to their way of life and to the life of others that are perhaps impacted upon the society within which they live. So I think, you know, this is it's a global game that people are involved with. It's a people sport. It's relative to where you are and the time and place that you are, and we can formalise it, and in some ways we can provide an educational environment which suits our needs. There'll be different needs in different places. It's also quite a localised sport in many cases. So I think enterprise entrepreneurial activity happens everywhere, all scales of life, in all types of countries, whether they be considered developed or, in my view, lazy, as opposed to others who are emerging. And you certainly, if you look at emerging economies, and there are a number of significant emerging economies around the globe, the amount of enterprise and entrepreneurial activity going on in those economies is significant.
Right, thank you. Maybe a hand for my panel. Thank you, Paul, Peter, and John. We've reached this magic 1:30, and that's where the unfortunately international people can't join us now. But thank you for being here and for the panel sharing their experiences. We invite you for informal lunch where you can actually debate more of these concepts one-to-one with them as well. But just allow me just to thank Sophie, Lena and Sue as well for the arrangements and the company doing the streaming and everything. Well, I just can't read the name behind. CN UK TV. So thank you for that as well, and we will put it on YouTube later on as well for further references as well. So thank you from my side for attending.